known about music. I mean, I got into rock and roll music at a pretty young age. I had two older sisters who had lots of records, and when I was and I loved listening to them. And I from a young age, even before I could read, I would pick out my favorite records, like Who Wears Short Shorts was, I remember one. And I would know by the color of the labels, and I would horrify my sisters with all my baby food and my hands and everything, and grab at the records that I liked. So I guess it was pretty sealed from the time of very young. I also came from a musical family. I had grew up in a Mexican-American family in LA, and had lots of weekend getaways that were full of them playing mostly Mexican music, rancheras and mariachi music. And my uncles all would have guitars and play and sing and get very drunk. And this was like a normal every weekend sort of thing for me. So I was always around music, and I became a rock and roll fan very young. I think a lot of it came from because I thought it was really something exciting. I actually realized at a young age that music was something that was exciting, and that was what made me love it so much, I guess, from young time. In 1976, I became a fan of the Ramones. I'd read about them in magazines, in New York magazines, and I'd seen this emerging music scene was happening in CBGBs. And I saw photos of the Ramones in Rock Scene magazine and Cream magazine as this new thing going on, and I was very taken by this look of these kind of really dirty looking people, because it had been the glam rock era had been going on, and it's a very kind of pompous time of music. And so to see these guys in these tight jeans and dirty t-shirts and leather jackets and bowl head haircuts was just really great. I just already knew I liked it before hearing it, and when I heard their first album, I kind of lost my mind. Also, they came right away to Los Angeles, where I was living, and they played a lot. They played at the Whiskey A Go-Go. They played every kind of place, every suburb of Los Angeles. And there was this group of about 20 kids and people, actually not even just kids, but people that went to go see them every time. It was the same 20 people. We didn't hardly know each other, but we would see each other at all these shows, and I realized that there was some kind of community, happening, and it was really all kinds of people, other musicians. Some people were musicians, a lot of teenagers, young people, suburban kids, some glam rock hangovers, some school teachers, and it was kind of us weird, some old hippies and some bikers, and it was before the British punk rock invasion. It was a lot more of a scene from Mad Magazine. If you ever see a crowd scene in Mad Magazine with someone with their tongue hanging out and someone hammering a nail into their head, and it looked like that. It was just these weird kind of freaky people. And I realized really early that, these are some people. So I thought we could all keep in touch if we had a newsletter, because there was no internet at this time. So I just collected everyone's addresses and started making these Xerox fanzines. And so the Ramones, actually, their managers and record company people who were around saw all of this happening, and it probably was happening in every major city they went to, that there was this group of people that were willing to work hard, that were very excited in this grassroots sort of thing. And so they were very cooperative. So they would give us any information we need, any photos, all the newest records and things. So, and it was good. It was fun. I was 17 at the time, and so I had this mail order fanzine with all these fans so we could keep in touch. And thus it started a community which actually endures until today. A lot of these people were at my show last night in Los Angeles, it actually helped create a community. So it was community activism.
I was a teenage punk working at a Hollywood Boulevard record store. Rick James came in.
I got interested in the group The Screamers, who are cult legendary now and were actually very famous in Los Angeles at the time, and they were the greatest hope that never quite happened, and one of the most interesting bands. But after I moved out of my parents' house, I ended up just kind of moving in on them, their house. But they decided, since I was going to move in, they would put me to work, or my writing skills, to put them to work, and so I did a fanzine newsletter for them as well, to pay my way in that world. Then that was even more direct of a thing into music. I always knew I wanted to be near music and around music and involved in music, but I wasn't a musician at that time. I had no intention of being a musician. So that exposed me to a lot of new things, like German electronic music of the late 70s, and they were into like Dario Argento and John Waters films, and that was my first exposure to that. They came from Seattle via New York, and so there was a lot of people in their entourage that came with them. It was kind of like a migration of underground artists, drag performers, underground actors, makeup artists, Fayette from the Coquettes from San Francisco, the transvestite theater group. Punk rock was really formed with these creative forces that weren't just angry suburban kids. It was actually artistic people. It was actually, the entertainers and weird, acid freak entertainers, but and so that fed into the early Los Angeles scene, and I think bands like the Weirdos came out of art school, and there was a lot of that. So I think a lot of people, when they think of the early punk rock scene of LA, you just think of Darby Crash and the Germs and punk rock, and then the next thing they think of is Black Flag and hardcore and stuff. And really the early scene was very colorful, a creative sort of anger and a creative sort of askew way of saying, like, I don't want to be like everyone else, and I'm going to be, some people made themselves as ugly as they could be or as weird as they could be, and just as long as it wasn't normal and it bucked the system, that was going to work, in your favor, and that was a really exciting time in music for LA, and an exciting time in music in general. Well, my first choice for music, I didn't have any choice, actually. I had met Jeffrey Lee Pierce before he had started the Gun Club, and we became friends, and we met one night at a concert, a Parrot and Brew concert at the Whiskey, and we got to talking, and he had traveled a lot, and I had already traveled a lot. I'd been to Europe, and I'd been to New York, and he had been in Jamaica because he was writing about reggae music, and he'd been in New York trying to be a musician there for a little while, and we just got very involved in talking about kind of wanderlust we had for travel and seeking out music. And at the end of our conversation that night, he said, well, we should have a band together, which was at the time a very normal thing for anyone to say to anyone because you didn't need any prior experience. And I said, oh, but I don't play an instrument. He's like, okay, you could be the singer. And I was like, I'm not going to be the singer. He said, okay, I'll be the singer and you be guitar player. I know how to tune a guitar to open E. This is the way blues players play, and it's easy to learn. So a friend of mine gave me a guitar, and Jeffrey said, here's your open tuning, here's a slide, and here's a Bo Diddley record, and just learn that rhythm, and you don't really need anything else. And so thus was the start of the Gun Club. So he actually came up with the idea that I'd be a guitar player. But luckily I had some aptitude for it, and here I am. Me and Jeffrey and Brad Dunning, who is quite a famous interior designer now, and a guy named Don Snowden who played bass, and yeah, so it was the early version of the Gun Club, and we just decided the Creeping Ritual, after playing out as the Creeping Ritual a few times, we decided it was a bit too gothic sounding for us. And so Keith Morris of the Circle Jerks, who was very good friends with Jeffrey, suggested the Gun Club. And we thought, oh, that sounds great. It's a bit dangerous and very to the point. So, thus we became the Gun Club. And the Creeping Ritual became Jeffrey's publishing company.
Ladies and gentlemen, live from the Peppermint Lounge, the Cramps.
There was a period where we weren't going to record anything new, and we were playing a lot of cover versions, and so I guess to kind of circumvent the idea of a new studio recording, we were going to record a live album. So we did a recording at the Peppermint Lounge, a very historic New York night spot from the 50s and 60s, and it was great. They were very strict about their vision. They were very sure about what the music should sound like and what the whole concept of the band was and the way things should be and the way things, so it was really good for me to learn from them how to stay true to that kind of vision, the Gun Club as well, it was a kind of uncompromising sort of situation, and but working with them, they were hilarious, like very, very good. I mean, Ivy taught me a lot about guitar. I mean, I'd never plugged an effect pedal in my life before I was in the Cramps, so they taught me how to use a fuzz pedal and how to hit the whammy bar on the guitar a lot, and and we had a very good time. I mean, for me, I was like 21 years old, so I was very young and very, willing to do whatever they would say to do, and it was good because I think they saw that when they asked me to join the band, that I was very basic player. I remember thinking, how am I going to learn all these hard songs they have? It was pretty free too, and if I'm saying they had a very strict idea, but it was good because I was able to be a much more expressionist type of player, because my role in that was kind of the bass player, the fuzz guitar player, played a lot of the bass parts, and also it was a really good experimenting with noise and sound. Like I said, I'd never played a fuzz pedal before, and I really learned a lot about manipulating sound and able to, I was always had been a big fan of Jimi Hendrix, and so I realized, oh, this is the kind of sound Jimi Hendrix did, and I actually liked, because Jimi Hendrix could make a guitar sound like a plane taking off or a UFO landing or something like that, and that's actually was my approach. It's usually very visual and very cinematic. I have a picture, actually more of a picture in my mind than I do a musical idea a lot of the time from playing guitar, and so it was very good, very worthwhile. It was worth quitting college for. It was another kind of education. I did the Psychedelic Jungle album and the Smell of Female live album, and I'm on the Bad Music for Bad People, which was a popular album for them. It was like 83 even. Probably, I was in the band from 80 to 83. Yeah, because in 84 I was already recording again with Jeffrey Lee Pierce and the Gun Club. So the Gun Club had been on tour. We had kind of mutually fallen apart with the Cramps, and like I said, there was a lot of legal hassle going on, So the band was kind of inactive a lot of the time, besides doing the Peppermint Lounge. After that, there still was all this, before that came out, there was a time, quite a period of legal hassles going on, and which left a lot of free time on my hands, and they were a bit depressed about things going on and not sure what was going on, and I was actually had a lot of free time and was on drugs, and I ended up taking a lot of drugs and becoming, not very productive, I would imagine, and they weren't being very, I don't think it was working at all. Things weren't working out, and actually I think they just said, like, we don't know what's going on, so let's just, stop doing stuff for a while. I was so out of it, I wouldn't have known if they were saying you're out of the band or not. Well, I knew they were saying that, but I didn't take it very, personally, really, and actually, just like 10 minutes after that happened, Jeffrey Lee Pierce called me and said, my whole band quit and I'm in Australia. Can you come to Australia tomorrow? Can you get on a plane? And so, and I was just gonna go fill in and do that. And we ended up deciding to stick with a lineup with me, Patricia Morse and him. And we asked Terry Graham, who had quit the band, to come back. And we ended up recording the album, The Las Vegas Story, which came out in, I think, like 84, 85. We recorded it at Ocean Way Studios in LA, and Ry Cooder was recording, I believe it was a Paris, Texas soundtrack, and so all of his stuff was in there, and we had the late night, the graveyard shift of time, which was the cheap time, so we were in from midnight to 6 a.m. So we snuck in and we used a lot of his percussion instruments, and we found these things we were called the whirling whirlies, which were these plastic tubes you whirl around your head and they make a wind sort of sound. So those were really great. So we were all in there with these tubes flying around. And also actually at that time, and the time we were recording in the graveyard shift, Stevie Nicks was recording a solo album of hers. So she would roll in at 2 a.m. and a white limousine, and about 80 people would get out of it with lots of bangle bracelets clinking, and then they would come in and invade all the bathrooms, so you couldn't go in them, with the guards on the doors all night, and so that was exciting.
I wonder what they were doing.
I don't know. They were blowing coke up her ass, if you believe the rumors. Yes, we went, after the Las Vegas Story, which had great critical acclaim, especially in the UK and Europe, which was a stronghold for the Gun Club at the time, kind of very unknown in our own country, but more known in Europe and UK, we had been actually on a really long American tour, like maybe 2 American tours back to back, and then very long European tour, and then I think people were getting fed up because it was a pretty wild, drunken scene and long, hard work. And we'd had all our equipment stolen once, and then we had all our personal stuff stolen another time out of the van in Manchester. So that was the last straw for Terry, and he left in the middle of the night, and we carried on with a pickup drummer, and it was just completely awful. And we went on for another few months, went back to London, decided we're gonna stay in London, me, Patricia, and Jeffrey. So we all made that decision, we're to stay in Europe because we could work there better, and we were more well-known, and it was, we could work there. And actually Reagan had just been re-elected in the US, so we said, we're not going back till he's gone. And so we kept our promise, and we moved to London, then we broke the band up. But that was okay, because then that led to me being free, and actually Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds were in London, and we were friends, and they knew I was not doing anything, so they asked me to join them for one tour. And so I had the free time and said yes, and I ended up moving to Berlin, doing, shooting the Wim Wenders film, Wings of Desire, and also, playing with them, and they were living in Berlin at the time and rehearsing in Berlin, and I quite fell in love with it there. It was when it was still West Berlin, before the wall came down, so I just ended up moving there because of work, because the band was there, and I ended up in his band for 3 more years, one tour, and I just ended up, I think because I was, willing to relocate and things, and just one thing led to another. That was kind of one of my first things to do in the Bad Seeds, was to record the songs for that, the live songs, and then perform them. Well, the Wim Wenders thing, it was great. Wim Wenders is a huge rock and roll fan. Obviously, that's why he puts a lot of music in his films, and people like The Cave in his films, and so when we were filming that, he was like saying like, "Oh, I've seen the Gun Club so many times at the Club Lingerie," and stuff. And I was like, "Wow, it's pretty incredible." But he's great. He's great. He's a director. He's very much like his films. He's very slow and thoughtful, and he's moving like his films move. A lot. He's not a hysterical director or anything. Very, 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 very cool, and the people working with him, very, very so creative, and you can really feel that. And you could tell he was really good at making it feel like something was happening, and it was, a cool experience. I had no idea it would be such an amazing film, and, the classic that it is. And it's very proud to be associated with it, even for 10 seconds, or whatever, So the time of moving to London, after the Gun Club broke up, and then I was a bit at loose ends of what to do, and me and Patricia decided we should maybe make a band together. Because at the end of that Gun Club tour, it was actually it was 4 people who nobody was speaking to anyone, Then after a while of breaking up, me and Patricia had a conversation, and we were trying to import a singer from Australia, and that didn't work out, and so it's kind of the duty was left to me or Patricia, and somehow I got elected to be the singer. Much like my guitar playing, it wasn't a choice, it was just a necessity. And so, we did that. It was a short-lived thing. We made one recording, and we did a tour opening for Susie and the Banshees, which, was, ended up, we played at the Royal Albert Hall with them, and, but it was short-lived. It was not to have a long life. It wasn't a group that was very close to, I think, any of our hearts. It was kind of a means to an end, and actually I was quite, for many years I thought that recording was the one recording that was just terrible that I'd done, and that I felt embarrassed about, and that I cringed every time someone mentioned it, and I didn't even dare to listen to it. And then, about 5-6 years ago, all these people suddenly going like, "I got that for a Bible record, it's amazing," and, and like, "Is there more stuff?" And, and this kept happening over and over again while I was on tour, and I'm like, "What's going on? That awful record." Every time someone would say that, I was like, "Oh, that awful record." And they're like, "No, it's great." And so I put it on and I listened to it again, and I was like, "Oh, it's not so bad." But I think it was just the association of the time and how I felt about things and how unfocused it seemed to me. But it was kind of good that, even in that state, that the music still held up many years later, and maybe it was a little ahead of its time. I don't know. But and now also at that time we were trying to work, and the Fur Bible was not exactly a giant money maker for us, you know. So we got offered to play with the legendary Stardust Cowboy, who is a very eccentric singer, you know, who is famous because Ziggy Stardust, David Bowie admits he got the name Ziggy Stardust from the legendary Stardust Cowboy, you know, because he made this song called Paralyzed, which is known as the worst single ever. You know, it's the most chaotic, nutty, like kind of cowboy rockabilly with a bugle solo that goes on in it. And so he was gonna like do a European tour and needed a band. So me and Patricia and Desi, our guy from Fur Bible, we said, oh, we'll be the band. And it was quite nutty and fun. After that whole London, and then I was playing with the Bad Seeds, but then I decided I wanted to move back to the United States, and I moved back to Los Angeles after Berlin, and started a group. I decided I need a musical project to work on, so I started a group with this jazz singer named Sally Norvell, who was with mutual friends, and that was kind of more along the lines of stuff I'd learned in Berlin, and more moodier cabaret sort of band, and we made a couple records, and you know, had some success, and but felt really unappreciated in Los Angeles, so we actually moved to New York, found a very accepting community there, and we made another record for Jet Set Records called Adulterers Anonymous. But then Sally actually had a child, so we kind of quit the band for a while because she wanted to concentrate on raising her child. So, you know, began a life in New York, and so then I decided, also, I was actually booking this club. They have a different musician book the Sundays for a month in this club that used to be in New York called Tonic, which was a very artistic club, and there was one Sunday I had no one, and so, as always, there was nothing else to do, so I thought I have to make a band to play here. And that was the first version of Kid Congo and the Pink Monkey Birds, and many years went by, and I had several different versions until I met the current lineup, which I met the bass player first, Kiki Solis, and he was living in New York at the time, and then our drummer couldn't do something, and so we met Ron Miller, and he was just perfect fit for us, and then we started recording with the three of us, with me, him, and Ron, and recorded at his high school. Him and his wife his girlfriend moved into a high school in rural Kansas, which for me was the perfect scene to record a record, you know, going back to my days of loving 60s records and things, and so, you know, and we added Jesse Roberts to the lineup, and now we're going full force on our second In the Red album, and you know, and it's being very it's being very creative, and it's being met with really good response, very positive. And we've been touring Europe a lot. We just got through with a month-long tour in Europe, and now we're touring the States piece by piece. Just did a West Coast tour, ending here in San Diego, and you know, we have a new album out called Gorilla Rose, and a new live album, limited edition live album, and we're just working on music, you know, we love. I mean, I think it's just the culmination of a lot of everything, of all the bands we've talked about, you know, and all of the things I've learned about these bands, you know, mostly is, you know, to stay true to the vision you want. But I just had to go through a lot of things to figure out what it was that I wanted and what was the most me, and to find the right people who are the most themselves to play with, which I feel very fortunate to have found. And, I think a cult band is a band that is really resonates with a lot of people who who see something. There might be outsiders because the mainstream doesn't see it, but there's enough of a big enough audience of people that do see whatever magic is happening there. And I think that's what makes a cult band. I think it's just, a cult band is a band that's too good to be mainstream.